My name is Amelia, and the night I uncovered the truth about my parents was the night my entire world cracked in two. I was sitting in my apartment sipping tea after a long day at the office when an unexpected call shattered the silence. It was from Dorothy, the neighbor who had lived beside my grandfather's lake house for as long as I could remember. Her words were casual, but they cut like glass. "Amelia, dear, will you still be visiting the lake now that it has been sold?" Sold. The word echoed in my head like thunder. My grandfather's lake house was not just a building. It was the sanctuary he built with his own hands in the 1970s. It was where he taught me to fish at dawn, where he told me stories about his youth, where the smell of pine and the sound of water against the dock shaped my childhood. And more than memories, it was mine. My grandfather's will had been clear. He left the property to me alone. I laughed nervously into the phone. "Dorothy, what do you mean sold? That house is mine." Her silence on the other end told me everything. She stammered, apologized, then hung up. My chest tightened, my hands trembled. I immediately checked the online property records, but the server was down for maintenance. The uncertainty gnawed at me. Something inside screamed that this was not a mistake. I grabbed my keys and sat in the driver's seat of my car. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My parents' faces flashed before me. They had always favored my younger sister, Hannah. She was the radiant one, the golden child. And I was the dependable one, the shadow who could manage on her own. For years, I accepted it, convincing myself it didn't matter. But if Dorothy was right, if my parents had touched the lake house, this was not favoritism. This was theft. The thought chilled me. Because that lake house wasn't just property, it was my future. It was the place I planned to restore, to someday retire, to pass on as a legacy of my own. And if they had sold it without my knowledge, without my consent, it meant my parents had crossed a line I never believed possible. I sat in silence, listening to my own pulse in the quiet of the car. Then I whispered to myself, they wouldn't dare, would they? But deep down, I already knew the answer. That night's sleep never came. I paced my apartment, replaying every memory of my parents' strained faces over recent months, every lavish update Hannah posted about her engagement party, every extravagant detail of her upcoming wedding. The puzzle pieces clicked together with frightening precision. The wedding, the house, the betrayal, and in that moment, one truth crystallized. My family had decided my sister's one day of glamour was worth more than my inheritance, more than my future, more than my trust. This wasn't just unfair, it was war. When I think back on my childhood, the signs were always there. My family had a solar system, and Hannah was the blazing sun at its center. The rest of us, my parents' relatives and myself, were simply planets caught in her orbit. If Hannah wanted ballet lessons, they found the money. When she crashed her first car only 3 months after getting her license, a replacement appeared almost overnight. But when I asked to attend an architecture camp one summer, my mother told me to save my babysitting wages. When I needed textbooks in college, I worked 2 jobs to afford them. The message was always the same. Hannah's desires were urgent, while mine were optional. I used to tell myself I didn't mind. I was strong, independent. I could survive without handouts. Yet looking back, that strength was often used against me. My parents treated my resilience as permission to neglect me, while Hannah's dependence became her ticket to endless rewards. The only person who saw me differently was my grandfather, Jack. He was a self-made carpenter who built the lake house with his bare hands. Summers with him were the one time I felt seen. We would fish at dawn, repair loose boards on the dock, and sit by the stone fireplace as he told me stories from his youth. Grandpa Jack noticed my curiosity, my drive, my need for solitude. He once told me, "Amelia, you don't follow the sun. You find your own light." When he passed away 6 years ago, everyone assumed the lake house would be sold or divided, but his will stunned us all. He left the property solely to me. The attorney read the words aloud. "To my granddaughter Amelia, who values hard work and solitude, I leave my lake house in the hope that she finds the same peace here that I did." I remember the look on my parents' faces. My mother forced a smile that never touched her eyes. My father frowned as if he were calculating lost income. Hannah scoffed openly, insisting she had spent just as much time there as I had, though that was a lie. Hannah always grew bored of the lake after a day or two, desperate to rush back to shopping malls and parties. The lake house was never her sanctuary. It was mine. That moment revealed the cracks in our family dynamic. For once, the scales had tipped in my favor. For once, I was the one chosen. And instead of celebrating with me, my family looked at me as if I had stolen something from them. In the years that followed, I poured myself into architecture. I worked late nights, took unpaid internships, and eventually founded a small firm focused on sustainable design. My parents watched my success with mild surprise, as though they never believed I could build a life without their help. Meanwhile, Hannah drifted from one short-lived job to another, always cushioned by my parents' money. Rent, credit cards, vacations, her needs were endlessly subsidized. Still, I tried to keep the peace. I believed that if I stayed quiet, if I kept working hard, my parents would eventually respect me. The lake house was proof of my worth. It was Grandpa's way of telling me, you matter. And that's why losing it without warning, without consent, cut deeper than words can describe. It wasn't just the theft of property. It was the erasure of the only time in my life when I had been truly chosen. As I share this with you now, I want to pause for a moment. Stories like mine aren't rare. Many of us grow up in families where favoritism dictates every decision, where one child is exalted and the other is expected to sacrifice. If you've ever felt like the invisible one, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from, because your story deserves to be heard too. And if you want more stories about breaking free from betrayal, make sure to subscribe so you never miss what comes next. That inheritance wasn't about money, it was about recognition. And my parents' choice to take it away wasn't just betrayal, it was confirmation of a painful truth I had carried my whole life. In their eyes, Hannah always came first. What they didn't realize was that this time they had underestimated me. I had the resilience of years spent fending for myself. I had the lake house deed in my name. And most importantly, I had the clarity that comes from finally seeing your family for who they are. The betrayal may have broken me for a moment, but it also awakened something inside me. The fight was only beginning. The lake house was more than wood nails and stone. It was my grandfather's heartbeat preserved in timber and glass. Every corner of that place carried his fingerprints. He had built it in the 1970s with his own 2 hands. No contractors, no shortcuts. Just sweat, calloused palms, and a stubborn belief that a home meant something more than a roof. I can still see it now. A rustic 3-bedroom cabin overlooking the shimmering surface of Lake Winnipegosis. Exposed beams lined the ceilings. A massive stone fireplace stood at the center like a guardian of warmth. Windows framed the water in every season. Ice crystals in winter. Green ripples in summer, golden light in autumn. Outside the dock stretched 20 feet into the lake. As a child, I would dangle my legs from its edge toes, brushing cool water as dragonflies zipped past. The boathouse smelled of oil and cedar housing Grandpa's old fishing boat, and the weathered canoe he taught me to paddle when I was 7. Those summers were the rhythm of my childhood. The crackle of the fire, the creak of wooden floors, the hush of trees swaying at night. These were the sounds that shaped me. When school was hard or Hannah's spotlight felt blinding, the lake house became my refuge. There, I wasn't second best. I was simply Amelia, granddaughter of Jack, student of quiet strength. When he passed, grief felt unbearable. Yet hearing the lawyer read his will brought tears of a different kind. To my granddaughter Amelia, who appreciates hard work and solitude, I leave my lake house and all its contents. Those words were a benediction. They weren't just a gift, they were proof. Proof that someone saw me, valued me, trusted me. My parents' reactions revealed everything. My father's disappointment wasn't even hidden. My mother's congratulations dripped with bitterness. Hannah exploded, declaring it unfair, insisting she deserved a share. But deep down, we all knew the truth. She never loved the lake house. She saw it as boring, isolated beneath her glamorous life. To me, it was a sanctuary. To her, it was an inconvenience. That difference explained why Grandpa chose me. He knew I didn't see the lake house as a financial asset, but as a legacy. He knew I would care for it the way he did, with reverence. That's why Dorothy's call hit me so hard. Because they hadn't just stolen property. They had stolen a legacy entrusted to me alone. They had spit on the only moment in my life when I was not the afterthought. Sometimes I wonder, do families realize what they destroy when they cross lines like this? It isn't just the deed to land or the transfer of money. It's the theft of memory, the desecration of trust. And once those things are gone, you can't simply rebuild them with bricks and paint. I ask you, if you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you have confronted your parents immediately? Would you have burned every bridge in fury? Or would you, like me, bide your time and build a plan that no one could undo? Tell me in the comments what you would have done. Your thoughts might help someone else facing a betrayal just as deep. As I sat in my apartment that night, staring at the shadows on my walls, I thought of Grandpa Jack. He had been the only one to teach me that independence was not a curse, but a gift. And yet my parents had twisted that independence into an excuse to rob me. I promised myself one thing then: they would not succeed. The lake house might have slipped from my hands for the moment, but I would reclaim it. I owed that not only to myself, but to the man who had built it, with hope that it would remain in loving hands. And so my fight began, not with a scream, not with a confrontation, but with a vow whispered in the dark. They thought I was invisible. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The cracks began to show long before Dorothy's phone call, but I had ignored them. Now, replaying every detail in my mind, those signs screamed louder than ever. It started with Hannah's Instagram feed. Her wedding planning had begun modestly, 100 guests, a simple ceremony. But within weeks, the vision exploded into something out of a celebrity magazine. Suddenly, the guest list tripled. The local country club was replaced by an exclusive resort. Her once simple dress transformed into a custom French gown costing $15,000. She posted pictures of floral arrangements worth more than most people's cars, photographers charging another $15,000, and daily updates dripping with excess. Each post stabbed at me. Where was all this money coming from? My parents, though comfortable, had never flaunted this kind of wealth. My father, usually eager to brag about business, grew evasive at dinner. My mother, once cheerful, now stared at her phone every time money came up. Their smiles seemed stretched thin, their words rehearsed. One night over dinner, I asked directly, "Are you too worried about the wedding costs?" My father laughed too quickly. "Your sister only gets married once. We want her day perfect." The words clanged in my ears. Perfect for her at any cost. Then came the first real red flag. I told them I planned to spend a weekend at the lake house for maintenance. My mother's reaction was oddly fast. "Oh, you don't need to bother. Your father hired someone new to take care of it." My father, staring at his mashed potatoes, added, "Ted retired." But I had spoken to Ted, the caretaker, only 2 months earlier. He never mentioned retirement. I called Ted the next day. His number rang once, then dropped to voicemail. I tried again the following week, still nothing. It was as if he had vanished. That silence gnawed at me. Soon after, I noticed something stranger. Family photos that included the lake house began disappearing from my parents' walls. When I asked, my mother said they were being reframed. But weeks passed, and no framed pictures ever reappeared. The lake house, piece by piece, was being erased from existence. Then Hannah arrived at dinner wearing a sparkling diamond bracelet. "Early wedding gift from Mom and Dad," she announced with a proud jingle. The next week, she and James revealed a 3-week honeymoon in Bali and the Maldives private villas over water bungalows. Shortly after, she rolled up in a brand new BMW, though her old car worked just fine. I confided in my friend Sophia over coffee. "Where is this money coming from? Hannah's life looks like something from Hollywood." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Maybe James's family is paying. Don't they have money?" It sounded plausible. Until the night I bumped into James at a restaurant. He hugged me, beaming, and said, "I still can't believe your generous contribution. Hannah is over the moon that you're supporting us like this." My stomach dropped. Contribution, I asked. James froze, realizing his mistake. Oh, maybe I misunderstood. He trailed off, leaving me with a pit in my chest. The unease grew unbearable when Dorothy finally mentioned the sale. At first, I wanted to dismiss it, but then I remembered the failed attempts to access my savings account online. 3 tries from an unfamiliar IP address. It had felt random at the time. Now it felt like a puzzle piece locking into place. Every thread pointed to the same truth: something was happening with the lake house. Something my parents didn't want me to know. That night I barely slept. I paced my apartment, replaying each sign, each lie, each disappearing photo. My mind circled back to one haunting thought. If they were capable of erasing pictures, dodging questions, and gifting luxuries they couldn't afford, what else were they capable of? The betrayal wasn't just beginning, it was already in motion. I had been blind because I didn't want to believe my parents would betray me. But denial was no longer an option. The signs were there, the money trail was obvious. And I knew then I had to see the lake house with my own eyes. My heart was pounding as I drove the 3-hour stretch from Boston to Lake Winnipegacy. The sun was low on the horizon, casting a golden glow across the highway, but I barely noticed it. Every mile brought a mix of dread and disbelief. What would I find when I arrived at the lake house that had been my sanctuary for so many summers? What would I do if my worst fears were true? The gravel road leading to the property had always felt familiar, a comforting prelude to the peace I associated with my grandfather. But that evening the road seemed different. The old wooden sign, Whitaker's Rest, had vanished. My stomach churned. Something was terribly wrong. And then I saw the moving truck. My first thought, absurdly, was, maybe they were delivering something new: furniture repairs, a surprise from my parents. But as I pulled closer, the truth became impossible to ignore. People were carrying items out of the house, not in. A middle-aged couple I had never met stood in the driveway, clipboard in hand, directing the movers. "Excuse me," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "What is going on here? This is private property." The woman smiled at me, friendly yet oblivious. "Hello there. Are you from the neighborhood?" "No," I said, my hands trembling. "I am Amelia Whitaker. This property belongs to me." Their confused expressions shifted to concern as the man stepped forward. "I'm Robert Peterson, and this is my wife, Linda. We purchased this property 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks ago. I stared at the folder of documents he handed me. My eyes scanned the pages, disbelief turning to horror. There on the deed were my parents' signatures and mine, or at least a very poor imitation of it. My hands shook so violently I had to hold the folder with both arms. "This isn't my signature," I whispered. "I never agreed to sell this house." The Petersons looked horrified. "We had no idea. We thought everything was legitimate. We already sold our previous home in anticipation of moving in." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm, though my legs felt weak. I couldn't believe what my parents had done. They had not just taken my inheritance, they had forged my signature to steal it. Every memory tied to the lake house, the summers fishing with Grandpa Jack, sitting on the dock at sunset, the smell of the fireplace had been turned into cash for Hannah's extravagant wedding. I left the lake house in a daze, driving straight to the county records office. My hands shook as I explained the situation to the clerk. She listened with sympathy and helped me locate the official record of the sale. Sure enough, the deed had been transferred to the Petersons 3 weeks prior. They had paid cash, the sale had been rushed, and the signature on the documents was clearly forged. The weight of betrayal settled like a stone in my chest. This wasn't just theft. It was a deliberate, premeditated plan executed by the people I trusted most in the world. My parents had chosen to prioritize one day of celebration for Hannah over my memories, my inheritance, and my sense of justice. As I drove home, I realized that this fight would be bigger than anything I had imagined. It wasn't just about reclaiming property. It was about holding my family accountable, proving that my life and my rights mattered. I thought of Grandpa Jack and how proud he had been of me. I promised myself that I would not let his legacy or mine be stolen. This was the beginning of the battle for my lake house, and for the respect I had never truly received from my parents. So, every mile I drove back, I planned my next steps. I knew that confronting my parents would be explosive, but I also knew I couldn't back down. The lake house was mine, and I was determined to reclaim it. Arriving at the county records office, I felt a mix of anxiety and resolve. Every step toward the clerk's desk was heavy, each breath tinged with disbelief. I had seen the moving truck spoken with the Petersons, and now I needed tangible evidence that my lake house had been stolen without my consent. The clerk guided me to the property records. I traced the files carefully, my fingers shaking as I flipped through the pages. Then there it was, the record of the sale dated 3 weeks prior. My stomach dropped. The price $375,000. $375,000. Far below the true market value, which I knew was at least $550,000. The buyers had paid in cash, eager for a deal that seemed almost too good to be true, and that's because it was. This sale was rushed and deliberate, executed with malice and precision. I reviewed the signatures. My parents' names appeared bold and intentional. Then my own what appeared to be my signature, but it was a poor imitation. The realization hit me like a freight train. They had forged my signature to make this sale look legitimate. Every instinct screamed this was criminal. Dorothy Matthews' words came back to me. Her voice soft and hesitant on the phone. I overheard your parents at the general store last month. They were discussing using the lake house money for Hannah's wedding. They needed to act before you found out. I sat down heavily in a nearby chair. The pieces fit together now, the extravagant gifts, the 3-week honeymoon, the new BMW Hannah's designer gown, the endless posts about floral arrangements, the engagement party extravagance. Every lavish detail had been funded by the house that belonged to me, sold, without my knowledge. I could feel my heart racing. My mind oscillated between rage and disbelief. My parents, people who were supposed to protect me, had gone behind my back. Every trust I had in them felt violated. This wasn't negligence. This wasn't favoritism. It was calculated betrayal. I immediately called Stephanie, my friend and real estate attorney. I explained the situation in rapid bursts, my voice breaking at times. They forged my signature. They sold my house to pay for Hannah's wedding. I could hear the shock in her voice. Amelia, this isn't just unethical. This is fraud, forgery, and theft. We need to act, but carefully. Stephanie outlined the next steps. First, we would document everything, gather statements, bank records, and witness testimonies. We would create an airtight case for both civil and potentially criminal proceedings. But we had to be strategic. Hannah's wedding was weeks away, and a public confrontation now could paint me as the villain. The timing of the action was critical. While I sat there staring at the official documents, I realized how meticulously my parents had orchestrated this. They had removed photos of the lake house from family walls, forged signatures, and coordinated a false narrative for everyone, including Hannah. They had transformed a sacred family legacy into a funding mechanism for extravagance, thinking I would never notice until it was too late. The clerk, noticing my distress, offered gentle words of support. You're not imagining this. The records are clear. You have every right to challenge this sale. And in that moment, a cold determination settled over me. I would reclaim the lake house. I would expose the fraud. But I would do it on my terms, methodically, strategically, and in a way that ensured justice without unnecessary chaos. Driving home from the records office, I looked out at the Boston skyline lights twinkling in the dusk. I felt the weight of betrayal pressing down, but beneath it a spark of empowerment grew. This was no longer just about a house. It was about standing up for myself, asserting my rights, and reclaiming what was always mine. The battle lines were drawn. I knew exactly what I had to do next. I thought of Grandpa Jack's voice. Stand your ground, Amelia. Some things are worth fighting for. He was right, and I was ready. My apartment felt smaller than ever as I spread out every document I had collected across the table. Bank statements, witness notes, property records, all tangible proof of the betrayal that had been orchestrated behind my back. I stared at them for what felt like hours, letting the reality sink in. My parents had not simply made a poor decision. They had intentionally stolen my lake house, forged my signature, and used it to fund Hannah's extravagant wedding. Every instinct in me screamed for immediate action, yet I knew I had to be strategic. I called Stephanie, my trusted real estate attorney, and explained the full situation. "They've crossed the line, Steph. They forged my signature. They sold the house. Every dollar spent on that wedding comes from what was mine." Stephanie's voice was calm, but firm. "Amelia, this is fraud, clear and undeniable. But consider the timing. Hannah's wedding is weeks away. If you confront them now, the focus will shift to you ruining her special day. We need to gather evidence, document everything, and wait until the wedding concludes. Then we act decisively." I nodded, feeling the weight of both anger and necessity. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about restoring justice while maintaining control over the narrative. Stephanie and I devised a detailed plan. We would collect statements from Dorothy Matthews and any neighbor who had overheard conversations about the lakehouse. We would compile all bank records showing deposits and withdrawals correlating to wedding expenses. We would track social media posts by Hannah and James to match dates and amounts spent, creating an airtight timeline of fraud. Even as we worked, the emotional toll was immense. Every photo of Hannah's designer gown, every Instagram story featuring the overwater villa in Bali, every post about a lavish party felt like a dagger to my chest. And yet I knew I had to remain calm, meticulous, and deliberate. Reacting impulsively could jeopardize everything. I had to wait, observe, and prepare. During this time, I also began monitoring financial activity closely. Every failed login attempt to my savings account, every unexplained transaction my parents made became a piece of the puzzle. I started creating detailed notes marking down dates, times, and amounts. The picture was becoming frighteningly clear. They had calculated this fraud with precision, assuming I would never notice until it was too late. Amidst all this, I reflected on my past. My entire life had been a rehearsal for this moment. I had learned to be independent, resourceful, and resilient. I had built my career from the ground up, earning every success through hard work. Those years of self-sufficiency weren't just survival. They were preparation for the moment I would reclaim what was mine. And yet I needed to be cautious. Confronting them too early could make me appear vengeful, the villain in my own family. I had to maintain the facade of calm neutrality in every interaction. Every dinner with my parents, every brief conversation with Hannah, I carefully observed, taking mental notes on their behavior, their words, their assumptions. Every comment they made about the wedding, the expenses, or the lakehouse was a clue. I felt a sense of empowerment growing within me. This was no longer passive anger. This was strategy, precision, and resolve. I knew what I had to do, and I would see it through. Before I end this part, I want to ask you viewers, have you ever uncovered a betrayal in your own life? How did you handle it? Would you wait strategically or act immediately? Share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes hearing your perspective can give someone else the courage to stand up for what is right. Because that is what this story is really about. Not just a lake house, not just money, but the courage to claim what belongs to you and to act with clarity, even when betrayal comes from those you trust the most. The engagement party was a spectacle straight out of a magazine, and walking into the grand ballroom felt surreal. My name is Charlotte, and every detail from the crystal chandeliers to the thousands of white orchids lining the room was a reminder of what had been taken from me. I kept my shoulders squared, trying to blend in, but my eyes couldn't escape the extravagant display. Hannah stood at the center of it all, radiant in a beaded white gown that could have been mistaken for a wedding dress itself. Her excitement was palpable. Guests murmured with awe, commenting on the scale of her celebration. I forced myself to smile politely, carefully cataloging every extravagant detail in my mind. The ice sculptures, the monogrammed champagne flutes, the floral arrangements that cost more than my apartment rent for months. Then came the moment that made my blood run cold. Hannah raised her glass and began to thank everyone for coming. And a special thanks to my sister Charlotte. She said, her eyes searching mine with a smile I could not trust. Your incredibly generous gift has made this day possible. We could not have done it without you. The room erupted in applause. Glasses clinked, laughter, cheers, and all I could do was freeze. Gift. They were calling the stolen lakehouse money a gift. Every painstakingly saved memory, every summer spent on that dock, every moment with Grandpa Jack, now reduced to a token of generosity in their story. I felt my heart pound, my jaw tighten, but I reminded myself, stay calm, observe, document. Any reaction here would only give them more control over the narrative. I walked slowly through the crowd, nodding and smiling, accepting congratulations with tight-lipped politeness. Aunt Patricia cornered me by the dessert table. "Charlotte, such a sacrifice for your sister. How wonderful of you to make it all happen," she said softly, her voice dripping with approval. I forced a calm expression. "Really, it was nothing," I replied evenly, masking the storm inside. Every glance, every compliment, every smile from the guests was a dagger twisting deeper. My parents moved through the crowd, glowing with pride, as if they had orchestrated nothing criminal. Every word they spoke about Hannah's happiness felt like a personal insult. They had transformed my loss into a narrative where I was the heroine, and yet the truth, the theft, the fraud remained hidden behind their smiles. I noticed James, Hannah's fiancé, looking at me with an awkward mix of gratitude and confusion. Did he know the truth? Was he part of this deception, or just another pawn in my parents' elaborate performance I didn't know? And I refused to let uncertainty distract me from the mission ahead. Every smile I gave, every nod I offered, was calculated, preserving the calm exterior, while I gathered information, assessed behavior, and mentally prepared for the steps that would follow. And even as I circulated through the crowd, a burning thought persisted. They believed they could gaslight me, rewrite history, and turn my pain into applause. But I wasn't going to let them win. At that moment, I made a silent vow I would reclaim my lake house. I would expose the fraud. And I would do it in a way that could not be ignored, in a way that preserved my dignity, and in a way that held my family accountable for the choices they had made. Before we continue, I want to ask you, my viewers, have you ever been forced to watch someone take credit for what was rightfully yours? How did it feel? Leave a comment. Your experiences may resonate with someone else and help them find courage to stand their ground. Because this story is not only about property wealth or a stolen house, it's about the quiet strength it takes to protect what is yours and navigate betrayal with clarity, patience, and determination. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, as if even the sky was conspiring for Hannah's grand spectacle. My name is Victoria, and I felt a strange mix of dread and determination as I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the pale pink bridesmaid dress Hannah had insisted I wear. Every seam, every bead, felt like a reminder that I was participating in a celebration funded by the life I had been denied. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock in the afternoon at St. John's Episcopal Church. Guests arrived in fleets of black SUVs and vintage Rolls-Royces. Inside the church had been transformed with thousands of white orchids, elegant drapery, and crystal chandeliers. A string quartet played in the corner, while an opera singer's voice floated across the room, adding a sense of cinematic grandeur. Hannah stood at the altar, radiant in her custom French gown, with its 15-foot train and delicate beadwork. James looked handsome in his designer tuxedo, exuding the charm of someone who believed he belonged in this world of luxury. My parents beamed from the front row, proud architects of what they considered perfection. I performed my duties mechanically, adjusting her train, holding the bouquet, smiling for photographs. But inside, I was cataloging every detail, every expense, every stolen moment of my inheritance that had been converted into fleeting luxury. $15,000 for the dress, $15,000 for photography and videography, $8,000 for flowers, $20,000 for fireworks, each number a cruel tally of the life and memories my parents had stolen. And yet I maintained a facade. I had to. Every eye in the room expected the smiling, supportive sister. No one knew what I had discovered. No one knew about the forged signatures, the bank transactions, the stolen property. I could not afford to let the family narrative twist against me. As the ceremony concluded and guests moved to the Rosewood estate for the reception, I kept my distance circulating among them with practiced politeness. The cocktail hour featured a raw bar and caviar station. Crystal flutes clinked. The orchestra transitioned seamlessly into a 10-piece band on a custom-built stage. Dancers led the guests to the floor, celebrating with a freedom I did not feel. During the toasts, my father stood raising his glass with pride. To my beautiful daughter Hannah and her wonderful new husband James, we spared no expense to make this day perfect, because you deserve the best. I sipped my champagne silently, resisting the urge to clench my fists. My mother added her congratulations, her smile masking guilt or perhaps ignorance. And then it happened. Hannah, slightly tipsy, lifted her glass toward me, and to my sister Victoria, whose generous gift made all of this possible. We couldn't have done it without you. Applause erupted, and dozens of eyes turned toward me. I raised my glass slightly, forcing a smile, my heart hammering in my chest. They were calling what had been stolen, a gift presenting me as the hero in a story I had not consented to participate in. Every word, every cheer, every compliment was a dagger twisting deep. And yet I reminded myself why I had stayed silent until this point. The evidence was ready. The plan was in motion. I would reclaim what was mine, and when I did, no one would be able to rewrite the story. Before we continue, let me ask you something. Have you ever been forced to play a role in someone else's narrative while the truth of your own life was hidden? How did it make you feel? Leave a comment below. Sometimes speaking your truth can be the first step toward reclaiming it. Because what happens next will prove that even when the world applauds a lie, truth can still rise deliberate and unstoppable. The morning after the wedding, the quiet of my apartment felt different, charged electric like the calm before a storm. My name is Isabella, and for months I had contained my anger, my grief, and my determination. Now it was time to act. The lakehouse was mine by right, and the evidence of my parents' betrayal was undeniable. I reviewed every document one last time, the forged signatures, the bank statements linking withdrawals directly to Hannah's wedding expenses, Dorothy Matthews' witness statement, and the timeline of social media posts showcasing lavish purchases. Each piece of evidence told the same story: fraud, theft, and deception. My parents had crossed a line that could no longer be ignored. Sitting at my desk, I drafted a letter to accompany the legal package. I wrote carefully measured every word. Mom, Dad, what you did was not just illegal, it was a profound betrayal of trust. The lakehouse had been my sanctuary, my future, my connection to Grandpa Jack. You forged my signature, misled everyone, and turned my inheritance into a temporary gift for a day. I am pursuing all legal avenues to reclaim what is mine. Once the letters were ready, I called Stephanie, my attorney. She arrived promptly, calm and precise, helping me organize the package copies of every document, witness statements, proof of the forged notarization, and a clear outline of the legal consequences my parents faced. I could feel my heart pounding, adrenaline mixing with a strange sense of relief. After months of observation and preparation, the plan was ready. At exactly 9:15 a.m., a courier delivered the package to my parents' home. Simultaneously, I sent the letter via email. My phone buzzed immediately, first my father, then my mother, then my father again. I let each call go to voicemail. A string of texts followed. "What does this Isabella call us immediately? This is a misunderstanding. Please answer your phone." I did not respond. Silence was part of the strategy. By now, the chaos and the truth would sink in, slowly leaving no room for the narratives my parents had constructed. By noon, relatives began calling. Messages expressing shock, confusion, and concern poured in. They had witnessed the polite facade at the wedding, completely unaware of the evidence sitting in my parents' mailbox. The contrast between appearances and reality was about to explode. Then came a call from Hannah, her voice sharp and frustrated. "What the hell, Isabella? Mom and Dad are completely freaking out. You're suing them the day after my wedding. How could you be so selfish?" I kept my voice calm, neutral. They forged my signature and sold my house without my permission. They stole from me to fund your wedding. Did you know? A long pause, then almost whispering. Hannah admitted I knew the money came from the lakehouse, but they said you agreed. I thought it was generous of you. I drew in a slow breath. If you didn't know about the forgery, then my issue is not with you. But if you were complicit, there will be consequences. Hannah's voice cracked with emotion. You're ruining everything. We have to come home early. James is furious. I said firmly, without anger. This is a situation your parents created, not me. So, before we continue, I want to ask you, if you discovered that someone had stolen something deeply meaningful from you, how would you react? Would you confront immediately or wait and strategize? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else find the courage to stand up for themselves. Because this moment, this calculated act of reclaiming what is yours, is about more than property. It's about asserting your worth, protecting your legacy, and refusing to let betrayal define your life. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. My name is Olivia, and for the first time in months, I felt the weight of every moment of betrayal crash down around me. Calls from my father, my mother, cousins, and even aunts and uncles flooded in, all layered with confusion, shock, and in some cases, indignation on my behalf. I let them ring. I refused to answer. My silence was deliberate part of a plan carefully orchestrated over weeks of observation and preparation. Then, just as I was beginning to settle into a controlled calm, my phone rang with an unfamiliar international number. I answered cautiously. Olivia. Hannah's voice, tight and strained, echoed on the line. What the hell? Mom and Dad are completely freaking out. You're suing them the day after my wedding. How could you be so selfish? I exhaled slowly, grounding myself in the knowledge that my actions were justified. Hannah, they forged my signature and sold my house without my permission. They stole from me to pay for your wedding. Did you know about it? A long pause followed. I could hear her breathing tense and uneven. Then, almost in a whisper, she admitted I knew the money came from the lakehouse. But they told me you agreed to help. I thought it was generous of you. Her voice trembled. You're ruining everything. Mom and Dad are panicking. James is furious. I spoke firmly, but calmly. This is not my fault. The deception was orchestrated by your parents. If you were unaware of the forgery, then my issue is not with you. But if you were in any way complicit, there will be consequences. Hannah sobbed quietly. I didn't know, Olivia. I swear, I thought it was your choice. Her words revealed more than guilt. They highlighted a family dynamic that had allowed this to happen for years. I had always been expected to sacrifice, and she had been allowed to benefit without accountability. After we hung up, I felt a mix of anger, vindication, and exhaustion. The situation was spiraling, and yet I remained strategic. My parents' attempts to manipulate to control the narrative were crumbling under the weight of the evidence I had compiled. Their illusion of control over me and over the story was slipping. I called Stephanie, my attorney, to provide a full update. They've contacted you, Olivia, she asked, her tone measured. I recounted the call, my voice steady. Hannah knew some of the money came from the lakehouse, but believed I had consented. My parents are panicking and trying to manage the narrative through her. Stephanie nodded. That's expected. It shows consciousness of guilt. It strengthens our case both legally and emotionally. Your parents' attempts to manipulate perceptions reveal that they knew what they did was wrong. Over the next several hours, I documented every interaction, every text message, every call. This record would be critical not just for the legal proceedings, but also for establishing the deliberate nature of the fraud. It wasn't negligence or a poor decision, it was a calculated betrayal, executed by people I had trusted most in the world. And as I worked, I reflected on the paradox of family. Those we love most, those we trust implicitly, are often capable of the deepest betrayals. It's not just about money or property, it's about the violation of trust and the audacity of rewriting reality to suit their desires. I want to ask you, my viewers, have you ever been in a situation where someone you trusted completely deceived you? How did it feel, And what did you do to regain control? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might give someone else the courage to act, to reclaim what is rightfully theirs. Because this is more than a legal battle. It is a test of resilience, strategy, and the determination to assert your value even when those who should protect you choose to betray you. The tension in the living room was almost palpable when I arrived at my parents' house. My name is Sophia, and for the first time I was stepping into a confrontation that had been months in the making. I wasn't alone. Stephanie, my attorney, followed closely, a quiet pillar of support and precision. My parents sat rigidly on the couch, trying to appear calm, while Hannah and James lingered behind them, looking anxious and slightly pale from the unexpected early return from their honeymoon. Uncle Steve and Aunt Patricia hovered nearby, their expressions a mix of curiosity and discomfort. "This is Stephanie Miller," I said firmly, addressing my parents. "She will be accompanying me during this discussion. We will not proceed without her." My mother's voice faltered. "We didn't need lawyers for a family discussion." I looked at her steadily. "This is no longer just a family discussion. You committed fraud. You stole property, forged signatures, and lied to everyone. It requires professional attention." The room fell silent. Hannah sat on the couch, tense, while James stood behind her, fists clenched. Stephanie opened her briefcase, laying out the documents in a precise, deliberate manner. Bank statements, copies of the deed with forged signatures, Dorothy Matthews' written statement, and records of unauthorized access attempts were all neatly organized. I connected my laptop to the television and began presenting the evidence systematically. Every fraudulent transaction, every social media post tied to wedding expenses, and every statement from witnesses was displayed for all to see. The notary's stamp had also been forged. Stephanie explained each point clearly, leaving no room for denial. I felt a sense of empowerment as the truth unfolded. My parents had tried to construct a narrative in which I voluntarily participated in funding the wedding. Now, under the cold light of evidence, that narrative collapsed. I asked them directly, my voice steady, "Do you understand what you have done? Legally and morally, you stole from me. You violated my trust. For what?" My father's voice was subdued. "We made a mistake. We got caught up in giving Hannah the wedding she wanted. We told ourselves we'd make it right with you later." My mother's eyes were wet, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. We panicked. Once we started, we didn't know how to stop. Hannah finally spoke, her voice quivering. "I did not know they forged your signature, Sophia. I thought it was generous of you to help." Her words, while innocent, confirmed the underlying family dynamic that had enabled this theft for years. I had always been expected to sacrifice, and Hannah had always benefited. This was the extreme culmination of a lifetime of imbalance. At that moment, I felt a calm determination settle over me. The confrontation was intense, emotional, and necessary. But there was still more work to be done, more consequences to ensure that justice was served, and the patterns of favoritism could never be repeated. So, before we continue, I want to ask you viewers, imagine uncovering a deep family betrayal like this. How would you confront it? Would you expose the truth immediately, or would you prepare strategically to ensure justice? Comment below with your thoughts. Your experiences may inspire others facing similar challenges. Because what happens next will escalate everything. It will test loyalties, reveal hidden truths, and begin the process of reclaiming not only property, but also dignity, respect, and the power to assert boundaries that had long been ignored. I stood in the center of the living room, feeling the weight of every year I had spent trying to prove my worth to my parents. My name is Amelia, and at that moment nothing else mattered except reclaiming what was rightfully mine. Stephanie. My attorney stood beside me, calm and composed, ready to support every word I would speak. I fixed my parents with a steady gaze. "I want my house back," I began. My voice did not waver. Every penny that was taken from me, plus interest and damages. I want a public acknowledgement of what you did and an apology to everyone you lied to about this. I want you both, to attend counseling, to understand why you believed this was acceptable. My parents looked at me mutely, the reality of the situation sinking in. The gravity of their actions, the forgery, the fraud, the theft was undeniable. For the first time, they were confronted not with questions, not with pleas, but with unassailable evidence. I continued, "You may not like it, but this is a matter of principle. The lake house was not just a piece of property. It was my grandfather's legacy, my memories, my future. You took that from me without asking. You created a story where I supposedly agreed to sell it, manipulating everyone around us. This will not stand." Stephanie handed them copies of the legal documents, neatly organized to illustrate the timeline of deception. Bank statements showed withdrawals corresponding exactly to wedding expenses. The notarized documents were proven fraudulent. Dorothy Matthews' statement confirmed that my parents had discussed their plan months in advance, intending to hide it from me. Every piece fit into a pattern of premeditated betrayal. Hannah's face paled. James's jaw tightened. Even Uncle Steve and Aunt Patricia, who had come for support, looked shocked. They had all been swept along in my parents' carefully crafted illusion. My father spoke quietly, his voice low and remorseful. "We made a terrible mistake. We got carried away trying to give Hannah the wedding she wanted. We thought we could make it right with you later." I shook my head. "No. You crossed a line that cannot be erased. But I am not seeking vengeance through punishment. I want restitution, acknowledgement, and accountability. You will make this right, or there will be consequences that go beyond what you can control." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We never meant to hurt you. We thought it balanced out somehow. Hannah needed more and you were capable. We took your independence for granted." I met her gaze firmly. "It never balanced. You took my strength as permission to take what was not yours. Being self-sufficient was not a crime, but you treated it as an opportunity to exploit me." Stephanie spoke up gently. "This is the moment for them to understand the gravity of their actions. The legal framework is clear, but the emotional acknowledgement is equally important." I took a deep breath and looked around the room. "We will see justice through, but let this also be a lesson. Boundaries matter. Respect matters. The people in your lives are not tools for your convenience. This is your chance to take responsibility or face the consequences fully." And to everyone watching this story unfold, here's something to reflect on. It's never selfish to assert your rights. It's never wrong to stand firm when someone takes what is yours. If you faced betrayal, comment below and share your experience. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow the journey of reclaiming not just property, but dignity and self-respect. Because the next chapter will show the consequences of their choices and how reclaiming what is yours requires courage, patience, and unwavering determination. The weeks that followed were tense and exacting. My name is Emily, and I watched as the consequences of my parents' choices unfolded with a weight I had anticipated but still felt staggering. The legal process to reclaim the lake house was underway, and for the first time, I felt that the balance of power had shifted. The court swiftly invalidated the sale. The forged documents could not legally transfer ownership. The Petersons, though initially upset, were cooperative. They understood that they were innocent buyers caught in a scheme they had no part in. A settlement was arranged to reimburse them for moving expenses, legal fees, and the inconvenience they had suffered. Their understanding brought me relief, but the emotional toll lingered. Meanwhile, my parents were forced to liquidate investments and take out a home equity loan to repay me. Every transaction, every repayment reminded them and me of the gravity of their actions. They narrowly avoided criminal charges thanks to a plea deal that included community service, financial restitution, and mandatory counseling. Even so, the emotional damage was irremediable. The lake house had been taken from me, but now it was finally legally mine again. Walking through the restored property for the first time, I felt an overwhelming mix of triumph and sorrow. Every corner of the lake house carried memories of my grandfather, memories that had been tainted by betrayal but now could be reclaimed. I replaced the locks and installed a security system, determined that no one could violate this space again. The house itself became a project of healing. I repainted the walls, refinished the floors, and updated the kitchen while preserving the integrity of the original design. The dock, the boathouse, the stone fireplace, they were all reminders of Grandpa Jack's legacy, and now they also symbolized my resilience. Each improvement, each careful restoration felt like reclaiming not just a physical space, but my autonomy, my heritage, and my peace of mind. My relationship with my family shifted in profound ways. Hannah and I spoke rarely at first, our conversations awkward and restrained. She returned most of the wedding gifts once the truth of the lakehouse sale was revealed, though she and James remained married. The fairy tale start to their marriage was irreparably tarnished, and I could sense her awareness of how her parents' choices had impacted everyone. During one of our rare phone calls, she asked the question that had clearly weighed on her. Would you have helped with the wedding if they had asked you directly? Would you have sold the lakehouse voluntarily? I thought carefully before answering. No, I said. The lakehouse was never mine to give. Grandpa Jack entrusted it to me because he knew its value. I might have contributed money, but the house itself was never an option. This acknowledgement, however small, was a first step toward understanding, even if the past could never be undone. I maintained a cautious distance from my parents. Monthly calls and occasional meals replaced the ease of our prior interactions. They continued counseling, slowly recognizing the patterns that had led to this situation. During one conversation, my mother admitted, "We lost sight of what matters. We got caught up in appearances, Hannah's demands, and our insecurities as parents. We forgot that some things are worth more than money can measure." 6 months later, I hosted a small gathering at the lakehouse for close friends and a few family members who had shown genuine concern. My parents and Hannah were not invited, a necessary boundary for my healing. We sat around the fire pit, watching the sunset, toasting to resilience and self-respect. Sophia, a dear friend, raised her glass. To Emily, who taught us that standing up for yourself is not selfish, it's essential. I smiled through tears, feeling the gravity of the lesson. For years, I had allowed my independence to be exploited. For years, I had put others' desires before my own rights. Now the lakehouse had become a sanctuary, in a new sense, a place where my boundaries were respected, and my inheritance, both tangible and emotional, was protected. The legal aftermath was complete, but the real victory was intangible. I had reclaimed my place, my voice, and the recognition that I mattered. Grandpa Jack's legacy was intact, but it had been transformed. It was no longer just about a house. It was about the courage to protect what is yours, the power to establish boundaries, and the wisdom to enforce them. The lakehouse had returned to me fully restored legally and emotionally, but it would take years to rebuild what had been lost in trust and memories. My name is Victoria, and as I stood on the dock at sunset, the water reflecting the golden light, I felt a mixture of triumph and peace. This was my space again, not just a house, but a legacy and a sanctuary that represented resilience, strength, and self-respect. I began spending one weekend a month at the lakehouse, sometimes alone, sometimes with close friends. I planted a garden that bloomed each spring, built a reading nook in the sunroom, and restored Grandpa Jack's old canoe. Every repair, every improvement was a way to reclaim what was mine, not just the property, but my sense of agency and autonomy. The lakehouse had been stolen, but I had reclaimed it piece by piece, memory by memory. Hannah and James had their daughter Emma, and her birth created a cautious opportunity for reconciliation. I visited them in the hospital holding my tiny niece and felt the complicated bonds of family love intertwined with the lessons of betrayal and accountability. I wanted Emma to grow up knowing her aunt had stood firm, that boundaries were essential, and that justice, while sometimes delayed, could still be achieved. My relationship with my parents remained cautious. We spoke monthly and met occasionally, but the easy familiarity was gone. Counseling had helped them understand the damage their favoritism and dishonesty had caused. During one difficult conversation, my father admitted, "We failed you, Victoria. We took your independence as permission to give everything to Hannah. It was wrong." I nodded. It never balanced out, but it's done now. I've reclaimed my boundaries, and that's what matters. The lakehouse became a symbol not just of the past, but of a new chapter. One that I could control, one that reflected my choices, my values, and my right to defend what is mine. It was a place where I could create new memories without fear of betrayal, a sanctuary where I could reflect, heal, and grow. And I realized something crucial: standing up for yourself is not selfish. Protecting your rights, your property, and your dignity is essential. It is not just about reclaiming material things, it's about reclaiming your narrative, asserting your value, and teaching others that boundaries matter. I sat on the dock for hours, watching the sun set over the water, feeling the breeze against my face. Grandpa Jack's legacy lived on in the structure, but also in the strength he had seen in me long before I recognized it myself. The lakehouse was mine, and it always had been, not because of papers or legal documents, but because I had stood firm and claimed it with integrity and determination. If you've ever faced betrayal or been forced to fight for what is rightfully yours, take a moment to reflect. How did you assert your boundaries? What lessons did you learn about resilience, justice, and self-respect? I invite you to share your experiences in the comments. Your stories can inspire someone else to stand up for themselves. And if this journey resonated with you, remember to check out our next video where we explore another story of family dynamics, betrayal, and the courage it takes to reclaim your life. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss it. Because protecting what is yours and learning to thrive despite betrayal is a story worth sharing over and over. The lakehouse was more than a building. It was a testament to perseverance, a monument to courage, and a reminder that standing up for yourself is always worth it. Sitting on the dock as the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for so many years. My name is Amelia, and the lakehouse was finally mine, not just legally, but spiritually. Every repaired floorboard, every blooming flower in the garden, every restored corner of Grandpa Jack's sanctuary reminded me that what was once taken could be reclaimed with patience, courage, and unwavering conviction. The events of the past months had been painful, even harrowing, but they taught me invaluable lessons about boundaries, resilience, and self-worth. I realized that family dynamics, no matter how deeply ingrained, could not dictate my value or my right to protect what belonged to me. I had learned to assert myself without malice, to navigate betrayal with strategy, and to reclaim control of my life with dignity. Visiting Hannah and Emma cautiously, I understood that reconciliation did not mean forgetting or excusing the past. It meant establishing respect, recognizing accountability, and creating new norms for relationships moving forward. Trust could be rebuilt slowly, but it would never be blind again. I had discovered the power in saying, "I matter. My rights matter. My boundaries matter." The lakehouse was no longer just a physical space. It had become a symbol of self-respect and personal sovereignty. Each time I sat by the water, watched the sunlight dance on the lake, or paddled Grandpa Jack's restored canoe, I felt the legacy of hard work, love, and integrity. I had reclaimed more than property. I had reclaimed my voice, my agency, and my freedom to define my own life. To anyone listening, remember, this standing up for yourself is never selfish. Protecting what is yours, asserting your boundaries, and demanding respect are acts of courage that honor both your past and your future. The lakehouse taught me that even in the face of betrayal, it is possible to emerge stronger, wiser, and free. Sometimes the most important relationships we must honor are the ones we have with ourselves. Guard them, nurture them, and never let anyone convince you that your integrity, your legacy, or your peace is expendable.